Welcome to the breakdown, everyone. 2 weeks since we've done a show together here for you on CFP, of course, because of the CFL Draft last week. It is great to have Derek Taylor at DT on SC back with me here on a Tuesday night, taping for you on a Wednesday morning, and hope you are all staying safe and enjoying yourselves and getting excited for a 2021 Canadian Football League season. We got some news on that coming up for you shortly here as well, but I do want to give a shout out to a couple of our sponsors that help us make this a reality. Of course, we are brought to you by our friends at Fox 40, the worldwide leaders in whistle technology. For 15% off all of your return to play whistle needs, free money is good. Visit fox40shop.com and enter the code CFP15. Fox 40 tweeted out on Tuesday about their close vicinity line, the products that are designed to keep you safe around the field. And they've said, did you check out the Fox 40 Tri-Layer Whistle Mask, the Whistle Gator, the electronic whistle? Let us know which products you are using. And I retweeted it from @CF Perspective on Twitter. And I laughed, Derek, because I had somebody that tweeted me back and they said, well, I would love to order some stuff and use the promo code here from Fox 40 because I love them. But I'm not sure my wife would love it if I was walking around the house blowing my whistle endlessly at the computer screen because I miss football so much and coaching. So that was HPE with you and me, Mr. U on Twitter, an Argonauts fan whose display picture here is him and what looks like the Skydome in a very big crowd in the Skydome. I would have to think that maybe that was the 2014 or 2015 East Final, I would think, the way that looks. Anyways, okay. It's been a while, but yeah, so they, I laughed at that because I'm thinking, how many coaches are so stir crazy right now? We always talk about the CFL and U Sports guys, but man, there's got to be a lot of high school football coaches who are like just confused by how long it's been since they've been able to actually get out there.
Yeah, I just think maybe the piece of advice we could give them that's the best is don't attempt to coach up your wife.
Don't
do that. Don't, hey, whistle, you left the toilet seat down. No, that's not going to go well.
And sometimes you actually just let people make mistakes, kind of like coaching, where you just let them make the mistakes and you sit back and you say, you know what, hopefully they just learn from their lessons. Because tonight, before we started taping here, my fiance Marlene and her daughter Mia are upstairs currently watching Temptation Island, and it gives me a headache. So I put a podcast in. I actually put the Sports Cage podcast in because I was trying to see what you were talking about with Terrell Jana earlier today, and I was listening to that on my phone while I was doing some graphic editing and stuff for CFP, which was great. But yeah, you know what? Just let them have their fun and you do you. And she walks over. It's actually funny. I was working out in the garage today. She came outside. I had the 98 Grey Cup on the TV while I was working out. She looks over at the TV, goes, "You are such a loser." It's like, thank you. I love you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Because
Perfect response from you.
Yeah, I've been watching these old Grey Cups and stuff. As always, too, we want to thank Sawdust City Brewing Company, offering brewery fresh beer delivered directly to your door. Visit their website, sawdustcitybeer.com. Shop their wide variety of brews and learn more. And of course, this May, listeners are getting an exclusive promo code. Use CFP during checkout to receive free shipping. Again, free money is good on all orders over $100. Shipping available to Ontario residents only. Must be of legal drinking age. Today, I'm having a Tropical Storm Mojito IPA because I'm wishing that it was warmer. How is the temperature out there, by the way? Has spring actually come in? Like, are you guys warming up at all?
Nonstop 20 degrees or higher highs for the remainder of the week and into next week. So awesome. We're crushing it on the prairies. It's fantastic.
That's awesome. Yeah, we've been we had like this nasty cold wind that has just been lingering for some reason in Ontario for the last while. We've been in the mid-teens and we dropped down at night the last couple of nights around 0. So it's like you wake up to walk the dogs early and it's a little bit bitter, I would say, for the beginning of May. But again, at the same time, it would kind of bother me if it was 25 degrees and sun every day and we weren't any closer to CFL training camps as we are right now, because that would really throw my body clock out of whack.
Yeah, it's bad enough the way it is, right? It's not almost the middle of May and we're training camp's not in sight as it stands.
This
absolutely. Is the time we're obsessing about, okay, I got to refine my play-by-play charts. I got to make sure I have all my numbers and accessible and boop, convert this file and that have all your data so it's easy to access during the season when you're on the road, when you're doing whatever, you rebuild. I have dummy charts in Microsoft Word for each team and that guy's on this team now and boop, boop. You want to be doing all that and we are not.
I feel like you have a labyrinth of like 6 and 7 layers of everything that you have. And I'm not exaggerating this to be like, Derek's the smart stats guy. I just, when you talk about your play-by-play charts, I have one template that I tweak as the season goes on, but I basically start the next year with the same template that I had from at the end of the previous year. And I'm like, you know what, over time, this has evolved in a massive way. I actually got mine from Ben Chapdelaine, the old McMaster quarterback who's now working in officiating and is making his way up the ranks. I think he's going to be, a pretty main player in CFL officiating within the next couple of years, if I had to guess, speaking of Fox 40. But he called a game with me when I was doing McMaster play-by-play. It was my first time ever doing play-by-play full-time, being paid by TSN to cover the McMaster Marauders. And Chapdelaine worked at McMaster, and we hired him on as a color analyst, and he was fantastic. But he had a template and a way that he designed his board. And at that point, I mean, I was just like going into it with notes on a piece of paper type stuff. Like I was so raw and just so young and had no idea what I was doing. So I took his template. It's like, you sent me over the kind of the base of that, and he did. And I've tweaked it now for 6 years, and I got it to a place where sometimes right before kickoff, I love it. Sometimes I don't, and you make the best of it. And I think we can both agree that the best thing that you can do as a play-by-play guy, and this maybe is a good piece of advice for anybody interested in getting into it, is no matter how you feel about your preparation going in, it should never affect the way your broadcast goes, right? I've had times where it's been one of those weeks, it's been too busy, or it's, my dog ate my homework, or maybe I went out in Calgary and stayed at Cowboys too long and didn't get everything done I wanted to. Any of those things going to happen. But if that ends up happening, it can affect your broadcast, right? That's something that I always have to remind myself. And it's always 5-10 minutes before we actually go on the air to start doing the game, where I've learned to block out everything that led up to it. And I just go, okay, it's game time. It's time to crush the broadcast. Like, that's what we get paid to do. You got to nail the broadcast regardless of what's on the piece of paper in front of you, because people don't know.
No, exactly. And that piece of paper always has way more information than you'll ever need.
Yeah.
But just in case, I want to know that the Riders were 7th in the league at -1 turnover differential in week 12, and that the average depth of target for Vernon Adams was 10.8 yards downfield, highest in the league. You never know when that's going to come in, right? So all your prep goes into it, and you use, I don't know, 20% of it, 10% of it. But sometimes you're going to talk about, oh, hey, by the way, Dan Clark came straight from junior football. One of, 17 players that came straight from junior football to the Canadian Football League. You got to have it just in case. Did you ever have a moment early on, DT, as I interview you about play-by-play for some reason? Did you ever have a moment where you were young or you were new in it and you genuinely hated yourself for not getting to all the information? Because that was a learning process. That was something that and I don't mean specifically, but did that ever kind of fester with you? Because I know for me early on, I would regret the work that I put into it when I didn't get to everything. But at the same time, I'm not going to jam things in that are useless at the end of the broadcast if it's a 20-point game. And I remember early on kind of being frustrated with myself. I'm like, I'm putting in all this work and I'm not getting anything out of it, and I'm not actually using half the stuff I'm putting. And then you just realize over time, you're like, no, but man, you know how good it feels when you do have that thing there that you want, like you talked about, that piece of information that's unique, that you feel like really adds some color to the broadcast. And that was a learning process for me doing play-by-play, was figuring out how I was going to maximize the value of what I was putting on there, but not let it linger with me. Like, it's, if you put stuff on, you don't use it, that's fine. Just keep grinding away. At some point that will pay off. Did you ever have that moment where you didn't feel rewarded by that? Honestly, no, just because like I'm so used to dealing with the files I have for Canadian Football League data, hundreds of tables and hundreds of thousands of different numbers. And you go, some of them are better than others. Some of them are more relatable than others. I had them. So I'm used to not referring to 80% of the work I've done. And if I thought about it, it might be depressing to think, so 80% of those aren't useful to me whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, I've had that moment too. I think we've both probably had that, where you're going through, and I started thinking about, because I was having a little brainstorm session on the back deck over the weekend about, okay, when the CFL season kicks off, what are some things that I should have on my radar that I want to make sure I have quality content that we can put out on CFL.ca and CFperspective.com. And And one of the things that I thought about was old faces, new places. And it's obviously one of the themes that we've talked about over the last while, but a direct comparison, albeit these things might be unfair comparisons, but what does Harris and Elizondo look like in green and gold rather than red and black? What does Nick Arbuckle and Ryan Dinwiddie look like in double blue rather than Calgary Stampeders red and black? What does and what's the other one that I'm thinking of here off the top of my head that I was Lapo and Nichols in Ottawa instead of in Winnipeg, and I was thinking, man, I'd like to be able to dive into those numbers, but now I'm thinking, okay, but how many games do I have to have until that's a fair and representative sample of what they actually are? Because I can't go after one game and Matt Nichols throws 3 touchdowns of 40+ yards and I say, he's completely changed his game. He's the deep ball king. Matt Nichols is no longer a guy who's ever going to be called a game manager by anybody watching a football game in Canada ever again. I don't know how many games in I have to do until I get to that, but I'm thinking, man, there's a lot of time you spend grinding to get yourself the numbers just for them to accumulate so that you can use them down the road, right? And that's another thing that I'm always like, man, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, and you get the payoff eventually of having all of that accumulated data. But until you have it accumulated and you put the work in, it doesn't mean anything.
No, and the sample sizes are too small, or what we think are tendencies are just noise, things like that. Yeah. I mean, and ultimately, whether a season is truly enough to get some of these numbers correct, it probably isn't, because guys only attempt 600 passes. Do we really know? You see it develop over years, right? Trevor Harris, no matter who was in charge in Ottawa and in Edmonton, especially when he changed teams, short passing attack, quick, get the ball out. His offensive linemen allow fewer pressures because the ball's out so fast. He prefers the short depth of target, so he's got receivers. He'll make Brad Sinopoli 150 targets and all-star. And some of those things do absolutely translate. Mike Riley loves to throw the ball down the field, and he's probably going to get blasted in the ribs. That's going to happen. Zach Collaros, year over year, maybe under pressure a fair bit, but he is elite at escaping that pressure and making a play out of it. No one has a lower sack percentage or sack rate when he's pressured than Zach Collaros. And that rolls out year over year. So it is great. You have to put in all the work to get there, but it's great to see these things develop and go, okay, that's not exactly just a one-off. Whereas Chris Streveler was the top or second rated deep ball passer in 2018. And you went, that won't stick. And in 2019, no, his numbers were bad. Very strictly deep ball, his numbers were bad. And Fajardo was the top rated deep ball passer. Yeah. And you go, oh, okay, well, maybe that number isn't consistent year over year. But to say for a moment, if someone took that to go, Chris Streveler was an incredible deep ball passer, you go, let's go to those 16 passes and look at exactly what happened, because that doesn't match up with with the eye test.
If Chris, you just kind of piqued my interest on this. If Chris Streveler had stayed in the Canadian Football League, let's say, and continued to do what he was doing in 2019, for 2020, 21, 22, 20, like just theoretically, if he stayed in the league, and do you think that he would have been able to actually, and again, injury barring whatever of him having to come off the field, but if he had been given that role and he had accepted it and he had loved it and he just wanted to stay in Canada, or the NFL opportunity never came, it's fun to think about, could Streveler have done what he did in 2019 over like a 5-year span? And what would those numbers look like?
Man, yeah, the interceptions would just be through the roof. Like Winnipeg would eventually have evolved to what now it's Buck Pierce. So if he was still there, they would have evolved into, I'm trying to think of anybody even comparable, but Streveler was such an effective runner.
Oh man.
Like it was incredible how well he could run the ball. And maybe that's strictly a numbers thing within football where, oh, okay, now we have the +1 of the quarterback keeping the football. And we have, we're now even, instead of having a free defender, we can just get after it. I have to imagine his chances to throw the ball would have become less and less throughout time, because 2019 really exposed that he wasn't a particularly good thrower of the ball, and he made some awful decisions at times. Luchez Purifoy had that one hitter right in the hands on a hitch screen. You're like, thank goodness I read this, right? Because he's not supposed to throw it to me. I'm in the opposite color jersey. But his ability to run the ball and still maintain a little bit of at least passing threat, if not he could fully execute a full passing offense as your starting quarterback. It would be fun to see a CFL head coach, offensive coordinator play with that full time for a long time and see where it went.
Yeah, Nathan Rourke, that's your role in BC. Okay, keep Mike Riley healthy and let Nathan Rourke go ripping around out there. No, he's probably a little bit small to be doing that. Strevler was a complete anomaly, as we know. I do want to give a shout out here as well before we dive into kind of the heart of the podcast to Neil White, who is our first winner of the Sawdust City Tweet of the Week. Had some fun with this, getting people to send in their GIF reactions, and the prize that I've already mailed out to Neil by the time that he has heard this is a CFP hoodie and a hat and some Sawdust City badges and different things that he can sprinkle and give to the kids and little trinkets and whatnot if he wants to. There's like a butterfly badge and a bunch of other stuff that they sent us. So, but the hoodie and the hat are courtesy of Area 51 Sports, which is a great new partner that we got here for the next couple of weeks. Hopefully long term, we're hoping to be able to turn around some t-shirts and CFP stuff in season, have some fun with, team branded apparel and stuff that we can give out to listeners and thank them for tuning in and hanging out with us. But Area 51 Sports Apparel, if you don't know about them already, newest player, Canadian team sports uniform and equipment industry, locally and minority owned. Their goal is to provide high quality uniforms, apparel, and equipment at affordable prices. Area 51 Sports offers uniforms and equipment for all sports at remarkable prices. They got a lot of fun stuff. I was checking out their website the other day. You can check them out on Instagram at Area 51 Sport. That is the numbers 5 and 1 at Area 51 Sport. Or you can reach them via email if you have any needs for your team. Area 51 Sports Apparel at gmail.com. We do want to begin the heart of the podcast today with something that I think surprised a lot of people, kind of came out of left field. I know for myself that I was working my part-time job that I got going on early this morning, and then I came home and I wrote an article, and then I ended up doing some more work, and I got a workout in, and then I went to go kind of crash out and have a nap in the middle of the afternoon, and I looked at my phone and I saw reporting out of Honolulu that Colt Brennan had passed away at the age of 37. Yeah. And it was a weird one. I mean, I could wax poetic about him forever because he was strangely influential. There's no reason that a guy from the mainland U.S. that goes to Hawaii, that dyes the Hawaiian Islands into the side of his head, should have had an impact on me when I very rarely got to watch him play games live because of the time difference. But Colt Brennan was such an interesting study in why we love football, I think, more than anything else. For me, I'll give my take on it in a minute here, DT, but I know that I talked with you a little bit about it on the Sports Cage earlier today on CKRM. What is your kind of takeaway from all things Colt Brennan and the news that came down today that he's passed away at just 37, man?
Yeah, Hawaii, gosh, whether it was the late 90s, early 2000s, became just this light phenomenon within college football, right? Because they, Hawaii, if you hadn't seen Hawaii, you're like, oh, that place must be magical. And then you see it, and it is. And 2, they had black jerseys. You're like, wow, this is great. And 3, the first time I noticed them was, who's this guy, Timmy Chang? And why is he throwing for 10,000 yards and just humming the ball all over the park? And Timmy Chang begat Colt Brennan. And then for CFL fans who know those two guys, both were in the CFL, if only briefly, Bryant Moniz was a Hawaii quarterback. And then I remember calling U Sports games when Regina had Cayman Shutter, who went to the University of Hawaii. He was their quarterback for a spell in 2013-ish. Yep. And there was just always this fascination because Hawaii, again, right, they were the mystery team. But man, 50 touchdowns from their quarterback and 15,000 yards. And oh my God, is this guy going to break Ty Detmer's record? Oh my God, this is unbelievable. This must be incredible to watch. So they became this phenomenon. And to the point where I was for a decade, I'm like, why didn't Timmy Chang stick in the CFL? How could they not make something of this guy who threw for so many yards? And then Colt Brennan was a rider for February to June of 2012 and then released, but that was after a pretty life-altering incident for him. So I just remember Hawaii as this slice of, in 2000-ish, this slice of college football that we hadn't seen because this was still the era of running quarterbacks in Nebraska, and Tommy Frazier in Nebraska was a little earlier, but we weren't too far removed from that era of football that a team just throwing it everywhere was so fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. And it's as I say, there's a million different directions I could go with this because this is in a strange way, as I say, Colt Brennan's kind of my wheelhouse. And again, that
Mm.
alone is a weird thing to say because he shouldn't have had the impact on me that he did. But to paint the picture, I was in grade 10 in 2006 when I started playing football for the first time ever. My high school basketball coach said the whole basketball team is weak and you guys need to get tougher and stronger. So you have to play football if you're going to play basketball. So we all said, all right, sure. So we all went and played football. I played tight end. I was awful. And I ended up kind of getting into football. And all of a sudden, I I realized that this game that I'd been watching forever, because, I had watched CBC Sports and everything with Walby and Don Whitman and Mark Lee calling games, all that stuff growing up, but it was kind of like a casual fandom. I was a Bills fan growing up because I had the rabbit ears on top of the TV, and all we ever got was Bill games from the local CBS affiliate. And so I didn't have much of a chance to be able to kind of learn the game. But when I started playing, and again, this it sounds weird, but I mean, I grew up in the country. We didn't have the internet. So it's like to think about the idea of going from no internet, and my family moved from the country into the city when I went to high school. So all at the same time, I am learning the game of football. I am making a lot of friends in a place in a part of the city of Kingston where I grew up that I'd never had before. And I was suddenly able to find anything that I wanted on the internet, right? Like I remember going to my grandparents' place and they had the internet and that was like crazy and it was like dial up. And so now I'm going to school every day and I'm sitting in a communications technology class and I'm a football player and I can look up anything that I want. And YouTube is this unbelievable thing where you can just go anywhere and search anything and there's a video for it. And so I very distinctly remember, sitting in grade 10 French, not listening to a damn thing and scribbling football plays and X's and O's and route combinations. And my mind was in that formative stage for me, just imagining, what if I ran a guy to the corner here and then this other guy showed like he was running it out and then he actually ran back to the post, and then you grow up and you realize, oh, that's called scissors. And it's like, okay, well, what if I did like, a go right on the outside and a 10-yard out and then a short, and we go 1 to 2. And I was like labeling diagrams as I'm sitting in classes of like read progressions and stuff. And so my mind was working in that way. And at that same time, I'm sitting in front of these computers that I have internet, unmitigated to myself. And I find out that there's this guy in Hawaii in a single season who's throwing for 5,500 yards and 58 touchdowns over 14 games. And at that point, you don't really have context for how crazy that is, Ken, because you're grade 10, you just start playing football. But you start doing the math on that. 58 touchdowns in 14 games. And you're going, well, wait a minute. When I'm watching the Bills, JP Lossman is like 2 touchdowns is a good game. Is right? So you start to apply your own realities to this and you go, that guy must be doing something crazy out there. Let me look more into him. And you start reading the articles and you start watching the highlight videos and you start to see they've got all these small receivers out there at Hawaii. And then you start to realize, okay, June Jones, and you realize his history and what he was cultivating out there and Colt's journey to get to Hawaii and how he had been embraced by the locals. And so it was this kind of interesting time for my football journey to latch on to this Hawaii Warriors thing. I'm pretty sure I had a picture of Tim Tebow and Colt Brennan in my high school locker. Like they were on the inside because it was every day. I'm the quarterback now of my high school and I'm opening up and those were the guys. It was like Brady, Favre, Colt Brennan, and Tim Tebow to me in the early 2010s. That's what it was. And so, yeah, I look back at his impact on me. I mean, I started wearing black forearm shivers as a quarterback, right? The half sleeves. Nobody does that. Like, what are you doing? You're playing in Kingston. No, like that's a DB thing, right? That's a defensive back. That's a linebacker. And usually they have the padding in them for the guys that are in the physical positions. For me, it's just a style thing. Why? Because I wanted to wear a black visor and have black forearm shivers like Colt Brennan. And you might think to yourself, okay, what's the fascination? He's putting up crazy statistics, but why did you actually like him, Marshall? The answer to that is he was not perfect. He did not look like a lot of the time he knew what he was doing. He wasn't taking a 7-step drop, hitting his back foot, and throwing the perfect dart to the perfect place. He wasn't getting the ball out quickly. He wasn't making the smart check down throws. He was out there playing on his ass. Like he was running around. He was throwing it across his body. A lot of the things that I loved about Favre growing up, watching him on TV, I saw in Colt Brennan's mentality of how he attacked the field. And I always had great admiration for the guys that wanted to attack the field in a way that I was never able to. Because when you start playing quarterback and you see people making throws that you can't, part of it's jealousy, but part of it is also just going, how'd you think to go there? Like, why would you ever think to spin around, make three guys miss, and instead of throwing it to the first person available and just getting rid of the ball, no, you're pump faking, running 15 yards further to the sideline and then throwing it 45 yards down the field to a wide open receiver that I would have never even noticed. And Colt Brennan had a little bit of that in his game, and his mechanics weren't super sound, which obviously hurt him at the pro level with Washington. But he, to me, was one of the first introductions I had to interesting, different, fun quarterback play. And honestly, there's a lot of the same ingredients that went into Colt Brennan's success and failure at the NFL that went into Johnny Manziel's success and failure in the NFL. Like the idea of scrambling around, making crazy throws, being the quarterback that everybody rallies around. Colt Brennan had all of those ingredients. And, when I think about his time being a rider for those 4 or 5 months that you talk about, DT, it's, if Colt Brennan had not been in the car crash in 2010 and had severe brain damage, which I don't know how he even got to camp in 2012, honestly, and was able to salvage what was left of his football career, if he had not gone through that event, his game, and I know people always say this, tailor-made for the CFL, it would have been perfect for the CFL. That dude, his style, with the right coaching staff, right? Because if he were just given somebody who didn't want to build something like Hawaii around him, he would have just been another guy. He would have been in and out of a camp, and he would have got cut because he was just an arm and whatever. But can you imagine if instead of Jeremiah Masoli getting the benefit of June Jones and Hamilton in 2018, that it was Colt Brennan? Like if the timeline worked out differently and Colt Brennan had reunited with June Jones and Brandon Banks and Braylon Addison and all these different people that played a role in June Jones' offense working in Hamilton as it did very successfully. I just, for me, it's a missed opportunity. It's a missed football career. And obviously the saddest part here is that his life is over and he went into addiction and substance abuse and things that just really, really terribly difficult for him to deal with, which a lot of it came out of the car crash that he had back in 2010. But the idea that, man, that guy, given the right situation in the CFL, he really could have been something unique and special. And it's so my takeaway from the whole thing was a little bit of shock, obviously, but then just thinking about all the good times that he gave me as a young kid, learning the game and appreciating what quarterbacking could be, and then also thinking about my current job covering the CFL and just imagining, man, given the right situation, he really could have been something special.
Yeah, and I think as sports fans, we all have those guys that kind of dart our sports lives, right? Like you remember guys that if you're talking to somebody who's in their 20s, like, I don't know who that is. Who is Tommy Frazier? Like, well, if you had seen Tommy Frazier at Nebraska, my God, if you had seen Charlie Ward, oh, wasn't he the point guard for the New York Knicks? Yes, but let me tell you about Charlie Ward at Florida State as a quarterback, right? Oh my! Let me tell you about Jim McMahon, right? We all have those as we go along, and just they could be just the most random athlete, but whatever it was that we saw something in that we wanted ourselves, like you did, or we saw something in that we went, oh man, I wish I had some of that, or ultimately we kind of pity them for how their life turned out to be and the problems that they encountered along the way. Yeah, they stick with us, just weirdly so. And I suspect if you don't talk to your fiance about, can I tell you a Colt Brennan story? She's like, is that a guy from the work?
I did. I actually, we were actually upstairs today, and I forget, we were doing something with our son, probably changing the 900th diaper of the day. Man, that kid can poop. And we were, and
he's a 99th percentile pooper. Is that the CF perspective number?
Yes, it is. But yeah, we were, and I said, man, Colt Brennan passed away. And she said, who is that? And I said, of course, I'm like, well, how much time do you have? But I said, he was the quarterback for June, because she knows my connection to June pretty well. And I said, he was the quarterback for June at Hawaii. He was tearing up the record books and doing a lot of special stuff that a lot of people haven't done before or since. And, because I'm giving her kind of like the Cole's notes on, I'm like, he had the Hawaiian Islands tied in the side of his hair, and he was, he had a car crash, so we didn't. And of course, because she's smarter than I am, she asked me all these follow-up questions, and she says, "Well, why didn't he work in the NFL?" I said, well, he was more of like a college style guy, and he would just sling it all over the place, and his mechanics weren't great, and his footwork wasn't great. And I mean, if you watch a Colt Brennan highlight tape, it's backyard football, and that's what made it fun, but it's also probably what was his detriment when he went to the National Football League. But again, it's like in the CFL, you need some of those core fundamentals, but you can get away with a little bit in the CFL, again, depending on what system you're in, what coach you're working with, all the rest. So yeah, she said, well, why didn't he work at the pros? And I said, well, here's why. Okay, but how did he die? I said, well, the details are still coming out and all the rest. But yeah, she immediately, she's like, can you show me a picture of him? Can you show me like highlights of him or what he played like? And I put it on, and she's just like, yeah, he's fun. He's different. And it's, I wonder at what point, if he had not had the car crash in 2010, if Washington had let him go, he probably would have got a run on a couple of practice rosters, right? Like he may, Denver, he ends up in San Diego, or he bounces over to the Jets or something, and then he's available. And if Colt Brennan were available, and let's say the Riders had his negotiation list rights, at that point, that would have been like, let's say it's 2013-14. Darian Durant is still king, especially coming out of 2013. So if you were to bring in a Colt Brennan at the height of Darian Durant out there in the prairies, he's probably not getting a great shot, but maybe he cracks the roster as a backup. And then maybe if Durant moves on and he's still with the Riders, he gets an opportunity. I mean, there was this kind of period after Durant, right, where the Riders were, whether it was KG or otherwise, Brandon Bridge being in there for a little while, kind of up and down, and
GJ Kinney.
Like it was
names in there.
It was an open door. I think if that door were open and he still had the game that we had seen in Hawaii, and he had been paired with an offense that knew what he could do, it would have been a lot of fun to find out what type of player he could have been. And the other thing I'll say too about kind of my fascination with Colt and Hawaii and all this stuff, and I was very hesitant to ask June Jones any questions about him when June was in Hamilton, because I had done enough reading to know that this is kind of like Michael Schumacher. Like, you don't walk up to an interview with Mick Schumacher in F1 right now and go, hey, how's your dad? Like, how's he doing? Because the reporting on that is like, been in a coma forever. Please don't ask me about that. It's pretty serious. So I was always really hesitant. And one time June actually brought him up because we were talking offense. He said, I asked him about a play one day after a media session. He said, yeah, he drew it up on a piece of paper. He said, we used to run this all the time with Colt. And he's like, I know that you liked watching Colt when I was Hawaii. So you probably seen this. And I go, yeah. And I go, do you mind me asking how he is? And June said, I mean, yeah, it's an uphill battle for him, but that he was watching film with Dan Morrison, who, if anybody was around the Ticats or followed when June was with the Ticats, that Dan Morrison is basically the downloaded zip file of quarterback knowledge that June has. He's given it to Dan Morrison and been like, you go be my copy and do the quarterbacks. I'm going to focus on the team, but everything that I know, because Dan Morrison has followed him to SMU and Hawaii, and everywhere that June has been, Dan Morrison has gone, including the Houston Roughnecks, by the way. So in the XFL, like, he's anywhere that June goes, Dan comes with him. But he was so kind of hesitant to talk about him at first, and then he just said it's an uphill battle, but he loves watching film. It makes him feel normal because he loves the game so much. So Colt Brennan in his final years, which again feels crazy to say because he's 37, but was actually watching Ticats cut-ups. He was watching CFL film because June was sending him plays and Dan Morrison was sending him plays and saying, look, you remember when we used to run this with you? Well, now we've got Brandon Banks doing that, and we're running that in the score zone. And man, you'd love the wide field here, Colt. And it's pretty crazy, again, that just the connection points of the CFL to a lot of different places in the football universe, to think that Colt Brennan's sitting around in Hawaii battling through some personal adversity, and the normalcy that he gets is from watching CFL film cut-ups. And June said that when Dan and him were back in the offseason, that they would go over and actually watch stuff with him too, and just sit down and just like go through film. And it's one of those kind of football lifer things that it feels like it's a made up story unless you know the people that are involved. And because I know June, and because I know how much he cares about his players, and how much he connects with them on a personal level, it's pretty easy to tell that he is the type of person that would want to do that to give Colt some type of normalcy.
Yeah, between that story and the thought that the Jaguars' Urban Meyer might sign Tim Tebow coming up, you realize, man, the coach quarterback relationship can be really strong and really intense for a few years, and it can last for a long, long time.
Yeah, except for Kent Austin and Zach Collaros. I mean, geez. I mean, that one was.
I mean, not all of them, obviously. Like, not
I know.
every. Everyone.
I laugh thinking about that because the connection between the Ticats and the Riders is ever present on this podcast because of where DT and I live. And I was actually interviewing Darren Flutie for a piece that is coming out on CFL.ca about Jake Burt, because Flutie and Burt were both Boston College graduates. And I had heard from Jake Burt that Darren Flutie and the Flutie family had played a role in Jake actually looking into getting into the Canadian Football League, which I thought was interesting. So I reached out to Darren and started chatting with him about kind of his background and how he played into all of that. And when I said, how do you think Jake Burt, the top overall pick, because he knows his game as well as anybody, because Darren's son, Troy, played at Boston College as a quarterback. And so he was constantly around the team watching Jake play. And I said, how do you think Jake Burt's game factors into the CFL, knowing what it is to be a CFL receiver and knowing what the CFL style of offense is today? Because he still watches games, even though he's living down there in the Boston area. And I thought this was interesting. And this is the whole reason I bring up like the Austin Ticats, Riders, quarterback relationship type stuff is he said, to me, the first person I thought of when I thought of what he would be in the CFL is Ray Elgard. And yep. I thought that was a really interesting one because the comparisons across eras are sometimes difficult to equate. But I mean, that's pretty good. Like a long guy that can get up and has explosive ability, but also can bully off the line of scrimmage if he needs to. And the frame is certainly there, but the speed, I think, factors into it as well. And if I would say that if Jake Burt turns into anything close to what Ray Elgard was, then the Ticats will feel validated for the #1 overall pick.
Yeah, that's a comparison Glenn Suter brought up as well, because Elgard just kind of sticks out in this era of the 80s. And I said to pull up his numbers, 6'3", 220, playing football in the 1980s.
That's like, big. Yeah.
6'3", 220 is kind of got a Corey Watson size, something like that. That's a big receiver in the Canadian Football League. And now take it back 35 years.
Yeah.
And go, wow. That's a man size. Like that's a man size receiver. So is the modern day version of that these guys who are 6'5", 6'6", and 250, 260? Jake Burt, Bruno Labelle, who was the 3rd round pick of the Ticats, Nikola Kalinic, who were listed at 255 last year. You go, wow, okay, these are big dudes in an era where Kalinic and Burt may be in like a 3x2 next to Brandon Banks and go, really? Those guys play the same position?
You know
really?
what I would love if they did a tunnel screen where Burt and Kalinic were lead blocking for Speedy. Like Speedy just runs down the line of scrimmage, and all of a sudden you're releasing Chris Van Zyl from right tackle, Darius Sirocco in space, and then it's Kalinic and Burt leaning down. How the hell would you find Banks?
Oh man, I say you flip it a little bit. You throw the tunnel screen to Burt and let Banks lead the way. Oh yeah. God, you tell me the guys in the booth wouldn't be howling watching that. Dwayne Ford would fall over laughing watching that. That'd be amazing.
Speedy can block more than I think we give him credit for. He's had some moments the last couple of years, not blow you off your feet type blocks, but he did run through an arm tackle from Solomon Elimimian in 2016 that I remember distinctly when I was the sideline reporter for the Ticats, because it was right in front of me, and it was right when the Ticats were starting to open their mind about using Banks as more of a receiver. And they threw him a little, I don't know, smoke screen, whatever. And he turned around to the sideline, and Solomon Elimimian lined him up for 25 yards, took a solid run at him for the BC Lions, and hit him square. And Speedy bounced off him and then ran into the end zone. And I remember asking him about it after the game. I'm like, do you realize that you just bounced off one of the best tacklers in recent CFL history when he had a 20-yard run at you and was just lining you up? He goes, yeah, man, I didn't realize that was solid until I ended up actually like looking up at the Jumbotron when I was running back to the bench. I was like, damn, I didn't realize that it was even him. So because he wasn't aware, he didn't have the fear, I guess, and he just kind of absorbed it and bounced off it and made his way to the end zone. But he also had a moment back when I used to be on Instagram where Speedy posted back in, I want to say 14 or 15, a video of him as a return man for Washington bouncing off tacklers. And the caption on it was, I'm a running back at heart, but my body just won't let me do it, which I love, because he does have that spirit about his game. But yeah, it's going to be a fun lineup. I kind of teased the graphic this week of different formations and personnel packages and things the Ticats can do with Burt. And I think, that leads us into some CFL draft talk here, because it was a fun one. It was surprising to see Burt go that high, but then you start to hear the backstory afterwards and you realize pretty quickly that, okay, there's some serious potential here. You mentioned he's been up around, I think 45 is what he was listed at one point, and Klinich is up around 255. Burt has actually played as heavy as 260. His plan, he told me, is to get down into the 220, 225. So he's going to be running a lot, and he's really looking at this as, I am going to be a strong receiver, not I'm going to be a thick tight end. And those are two massively different mentalities to take into this. But he gives them, I think, just an added element which you're looking for in the draft. It's the thing I thought was really interesting, the overarching theme, and there were plenty of them. I mean, we'll get into some of the other kind of bigger picture stuff, but we talked about the futures versus the now guys and all the rest. I think it was pretty easy to see in the draft, and maybe it was because of roster need, and maybe it was because of storylines I'm cultivating in my own mind, but it was pretty easy to see which teams really want to win now and which one. And Hamilton obviously hosting the Grey Cup in 2021. There's nothing like having the chance to win a Grey Cup at home with the roster and the coaching staff they have. And I'm not saying they don't take Burt first overall if they're not hosting the Grey Cup, but I think for me, them having the opportunity to make their offense that much better, knowing that they already have a lot of pieces in place. I mean, you could make the argument that, well, they should have taken an offensive tackle, or they should have gone with, a middle linebacker, a field corner, things that could actually improve them. But I think they made that pick, at least in some small part, knowing that dude really wants to be in the CFL, and he really wants to be in the CFL right now. And you don't have to wait, and you don't have to question what his intentions are and wait him out and see what happens down the line. It's like, you can get into the playbook with him now. You can give him the training program now to get him down to that 225 that he wants, and you can just hit the field running with him when you get to training camp. And I that had to have played into all of this.
Well, and he's had his NFL experience, right? So much of this draft was wondering, is this guy coming back from the NFL? What happens after his NCAA year? And Sage Dockstadter's going back to New Mexico State. What happens after that? Does the NFL have interest? Does he have interest? Jake's been down that road. He said he now signs his deal. And this draft, I mean, we talked about it on draft. There were not a ton of pass catchers in this draft for whatever reason, right? The two tight ends, and Terrell Jana goes at number 17, was the top wide receiver nominally off the board. Wow, that is unusual. You would have, I think teams probably would have hoped for more pass catchers than were available. So grabbing one you think can make a difference. And legit, if he's 225, that fits into every offense everywhere.
Yeah.
225 and 4.48 or 4.5, whatever he ran. Like, come on.
Well, and then he ran that at a heavier
direction. Come on.
Yeah, he ran that at a heavier weight too. And so he was saying to me when I talked to Jake, he's like, I'm going to be running faster than I've ever been before when I get into camp. Now, the thing is too, that might be slightly concerning, is he has had a couple of major knee issues, and those were back long enough that he's recovered and he's played football and feels better coming out of all of that. But I mean, you get lighter, and all of a sudden there's less reliability in the thickness to be able to absorb contact. And so I hope that this isn't one of those things. I don't want to write a guy's career off, obviously, before he even touches the field, but you hope it isn't one of those things where the mentality is get smaller, get quicker, get faster, get leaner, and it backfires for some reason on the injury side. But I do think that there's this misnomer, and Darren Flutie talked to me about this as well, where he said, guys think, well, I'm going to play professional football. Everybody's big in professional football. I have to get big in order to play with them. And Darren said he quickly learned when he was in the NFL that that's just not true. Like you have to be able to be quick and evasive and smart and know how to protect your body. Yes, you might have to go into some dirty areas sometimes, whether it's a crossing route for a slot or it's an inside run play where you're the lead blocker and you got to go find the middle line, whatever it might be. There's certain tenets of football that are always going to be extremely physical. But he said as a receiver, especially in the era that he played in late 90s and early 2000s, there wasn't a whole lot required of us when it came to the blocking schemes. And so I learned pretty quickly that I'll let the guys inside handle all the mucky stuff, and I'll be out here trying to get quicker so I can run away from everybody, because that was more important to him and his longevity, he thought. So I wonder if, I mean, Jake has a really good confidant in Darren Flutie to be able to talk with these things about, because he said they're talking every couple of days right now to try and sort out what his approach is going to be and nail it down. And the other thing is that Flutie played on the 98, 99 teams that went to the Grey Cup, of course, winning in 99 with Rolando Steinauer. And Flutie said that he's been talking to Steinauer. So now you've got the head coach of the team in the ear of the guy who's closest to the new #1 overall draft pick. And they're kind of working together to figure out, okay, what are we going to do here to give you the best chance to have success? That's a pretty good support system.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about Hamilton in the draft going forward. We wondered which way teams would go.
Yep.
You get a receiver who can contribute right away. Linebacker Nick Cross out of UBC, who was the rookie of the year in 2000, or in his freshman year when he was at Regina. And then, I mean, he got suspended for marijuana, which is now not a thing anymore. So that guy, I mean, that guy's going to contribute. Dean Leonard, the defensive back from Mississippi, maybe is a wait. Muhammad Diallo is the top defensive tackle in the draft. Like, they really, man.
Well, Brock Sunderland and Jamie Elizondo didn't think so.
Are we going to do reaches? Do I have to give my $50 Blizzard talk again? How when you pay $50 for a Blizzard, it's not really great anymore. But Hamilton, I mean, BC in this draft really swung for the fences, right? Yeah. BC went, they may not help us this year, but man, if these guys come, we are going to crush with our Canadians.
Yeah.
Hamilton did a very nice split in their approach to it, and having the #1 pick obviously helped, but they could have reached. They could have had, we want Ogbong Bamiga with the first overall pick, and we'll wait. But no, they went, okay, that we can do some stuff with this guy, this Jake Burt right now, and Nick Cross. I mean, is 22 this year? He'll be 22 when the season starts. That's a real nice addition to have as well in that first round.
Yeah, and Cross is coming off that ACL as well, but he was the leading tackler across all of U Sports last time that he was on the field as well. So, and the thing for Cross for me in the evaluation process was that I didn't really see him as a will linebacker, not as a middle linebacker. I don't think that they're going to allow him to play Sam. I just don't think that you're going to see many Canadians getting that shot, especially as a young guy. I mean, it's just way too complicated and diverse a position. So I thought he'd be a free safety, which is why I didn't mock him anywhere close to Hamilton, because I'm going Tunde Adeleke and Mike Daly and all the rest are there. But when I asked Drew Alamang about that, he said that he thought that he could do some special things at some different positions, and maybe they bring him in as a second and long guy to play a little bit of a Sam hybrid free safety position. I don't know what that means, if that's a cover 2 shell type thing that they do with Tunde. And I mean, if you want to put athletes on the field, that's a good way to get him on the field if you get him in camp and he feels like he's up to speed. But the other thing that we already mentioned the receivers, but I just wanted to throw some numbers out there because this is the breakdown and we are numbers nerds. That it was the first time in a decade that more defensive backs had been drafted than receivers. And that's not including the 2 tight ends, but it's the first time in a decade that has happened, where in the CFL draft, you've had more defensive backs drafted than receivers. There, in an average year over the last decade, there's been an average of, I think about, I forget the exact number that I have, but it was somewhere around like 9, 10, 11 receivers drafted per draft. This year, there were 4 that were officially drafted. And even if you prorate that to the regular length of the draft, which is the 8 rounds, not the 6 rounds that we had, because usually we get 72 selections, not 54 that we just went through. But even if you prorate it, you still end up like 7 receivers short of what the standard has been over the last decade. So these things do ebb and flow, because this year we saw, I think it was only 4 defensive linemen. I'll check here real quick. But in 2018, we ended up having 20 defensive linemen get drafted, and that's at the all-time record. So it was Daniel Joseph, Cole Nelson, Mohamed Diallo, Luigi Villain, Elaine Simakinda, Alfred Green. So you ended up with 6 guys essentially this year, but to go from 20 to 6 over a 3-year period shows how crazy the variation can be, just depending on the strengths and weaknesses of the positional group. And this year was an up year for offensive linemen, even though offensive linemen typically have a lot of picks. There's usually about 12 taken in the draft. This year, there was about 13 and a half prorated. Linebackers, it was an up year for them because it was Deshaun Stevens, Ogbongbemiga, Nick Cross, Grant McDonald, Ben Fladdock, Charlie Moore, Elliott Graham, Trevor Hoyt, Robbie Lowe's, Jarek Richards, Ethan McConzo, Miles Manalo. I mean, it was a pretty deep linebacker draft, but it was so strange to me, and this might be one of those that we look back on down the road, that I kept mocking Terrell Jana, who went to the Riders that you spoke with on the Sports Cage today. I kept mocking him to Ottawa, because you and I have talked about what Ottawa probably needs more than anything. And Ottawa had two opportunities to take him. They had 6th overall and they had 13th overall. And they decided to go with a futures defensive back at 13 and a potential futures linebacker in Deshaun Stevens at number 6. Now, again, I'm not here to rip Marcel Desjardins. Maybe those guys turn out to be great. Maybe Terrell Jana doesn't end up having a long career, whatever. We don't know. We don't have any answers. These things have to play out over time. I started to wonder on draft night as we were doing the live show with myself, Connor, and Wade, whether or not Ottawa is overcorrecting for the LaPolice factor through the first 2 years with Desjardins by drafting defensive players really high and just hoping that Lapo picks up the scraps. Like hoping that he's good enough to take whatever you give him and make them into players. Because if you look at what Ottawa has done here in the first 2 years of this partnership. In 2020, it was Adam Auclair 6th overall. In 2021, it's another linebacker hybrid, Deshaun Stevens. He goes 6th overall. Michael Hoyt goes 10th overall in 2020. Alonzo Adai goes 13th overall in 2021. That's defensive line and defensive back. Dan Bassambombo from Laval, linebacker, goes 19th overall in 2020. That, again, another defensive guy. The first player taken that is anything other than defense in the first 2 years is this year Connor Bergloff out of Sask. He goes 24th overall. Jacob Zott out of McMaster went 29th overall. Is kind of an interior glue guy in the 4th round of last year. And then it's Jake Julian, punter. It's Terrence Abrahams Webster out of Calgary, a DB. It's a long snapper in Keegan Markgraf. It's a linebacker, Brad Cowan out of Laurier. You go on and on and on. You start to think to yourself, okay, why aren't they prioritizing a little bit more on offense in the draft moving forward here when Snopley's not going to last forever? Coombs isn't going to play forevermore. Galanders isn't going to play forevermore. And you start to think about the kind of what's coming down the pipe. And yes, they have Wesley Lewison because they used to pick from Houston Baptist to get him as a depth pick. And yes, they've got some young fullback talent. And yes, they've got Marco Dubois in there. Yes, they got Dan Peterman in free agency. But the draft is usually the time you take somebody to secure their rights and develop them for 3 years down the road when they can really burst onto the scene. Ottawa just hasn't done that. And I saw a quote from LaPolice where he said, yes, I'm an offensive guy, but my job as the head coach is to look after the best interest of the franchise. And we had a strong defense in Winnipeg that propelled us to a Grey Cup championship. So I just find the dynamic there interesting because there's such a strong trend of them going defense in the first 2 years of the draft.
Yeah, and Lapo saying defense led them to the championship. They don't win that defense if they didn't get the quarterback in, right?
Yeah.
Very late in the season because they had some offensive pieces. Looking at this roster, maybe Jana's not a tremendous fit with their existing Canadian talent because Jana's, I'm a slot guy. I'm absolutely will play outside, but I played in the slot. And you go, well, Peterman is the Z. You're not moving Sinopoli from that 3 spot to the field, right? Coombs can play around in there, and then they'll presumably from this go American in the other spots. But like as I look at this depth chart, like you say, there are so many picks on defense, and they're going to start 2 Canadians on defense. Like unless they go, are they going Canadian at linebacker? They're going to start Cleon Lang and safety. Antoine Pruneau is phenomenal. Is Auclair from the 20 draft? Is he potentially an outside guy, or is he just going to be in that safety mix? Alonzo Adai's not coming this year. You wouldn't suspect.
I thought that Auclair would be the natural replacement for Pruneau, but Pruneau refuses to be done playing. So it's
so he's good. Yeah,
he's still producing and he's doing his thing.
Yeah. So to do that, to take 1, 2, 6, 9 players on defense in the last 2 drafts, and it looks like you're planning to start 2 Canadians. I don't know. I don't know about that. I hope they're. I don't understand what's going on there. And to be fair, we're not in the meetings, and maybe they will go Canadian at linebacker instead of some combination of Avery Williams and Micah Awe. But
here's of all the futures talk and all the guys that we aren't sure, and maybe they're going to go here, maybe they're transferring there. The one that I feel and this is just a gut feel, I don't have any information at all on this. I feel like Deshaun Stephens is in a Red Blacks uniform this July.
Okay, that'd be good.
And I really do feel that. And the reason that I say that is that, he's tweeting a lot about the CFL. Like he seems very interested in the CFL and interacting with CFL people. And that's not unheard of, but he's pretty educated on the CFL and how it stands currently. And I've seen some interactions with him online where I'm just like, that guy seems way too engaged to be thinking about other things. He did a great interview with Connor and Wade during draft season going in that I really enjoyed. And I think if you want to learn more about him and you're a Red Blacks fan, go back in the podcast feed because you will enjoy that leading up to the draft. He talks about who he is, what he's about, where he's come from, all the rest. But when I see a need for him in Ottawa, he has said that he's in the transfer portal. Okay. So he's leaving Maine and the door is open to him going to the CFL if he doesn't get what he's looking for in the transfer portal experience. And if you don't know what the transfer portal is, people want to transfer, they put their information in, they basically go into this window, it lets teams know that they're available, they can be courted, and they can end up somewhere. Now, I'm not saying that he won't get some nibbles from some places, and I'm not saying he's not good enough to get a decent home to, maybe he looks at somewhere that's like a Rice or a Houston or I'm trying to think of that something that's not like a top
South Florida.
Yeah, exactly. Like something that's kind of like a smaller conference, but still in major Division I football. Maybe he gets an opportunity there and maybe he takes it. But if I'm him, and this is just me because I'm not a big believer in the whole NCAA system of making money for other people while you just fight and strive to try and stay healthy. If I'm him and I'm looking at this, I'm like, man, I can go home to Canada and they want me. And they made me their first round draft pick. Yeah. And I can go in there and have an opportunity to play really quickly. And I can make money. And I can start my career instead of doing this whole like press pause and go play in a different defensive system and play for a different team and move to a different place. And I can just go back to Canada and just like be a professional football player. I mean, maybe he gets those looks that he wants. But what I'm thinking too here is that in such a weird year, so many people in the transfer portal, so many holdovers, so many extra years of eligibility. What's the chance that he just gets squeezed where nobody really comes calling at a big enough school because there's just not necessarily a place for him, despite the fact that I think very highly of the guy. So if that ends up happening, he just gets squeezed. I get a feeling that maybe mid-June rolls around. Hopefully we get the thumbs up on, hey, July training camp start. And I wonder if Deshaun Stephens just doesn't say, you know what, like, I want to go play football. I want to be wanted because talking to Jake Bird about why he wanted to go into the CFL, that was a big part of it. He wanted to be wanted. He wanted an opportunity to play football again and to extend his career. He didn't feel like he had that anywhere else, but he felt like he could not just extend his career, but actually be a meaningful player in the CFL, which is why he's so motivated to be in camp with the Ticats right away. And I get the same vibe from Deshaun Stephens in that way.
Which, if that's the case, I mean, they have the depth both in the last two drafts and with a guy like Christoph Malumba-Shamunga that, okay, you now have reasonable depth that you could go Canadian at weak side linebacker.
Yeah.
And then, okay, then this all starts to make a little more sense. If you have a starter there and you've got depth, and you mentioned Bassambombo and names like that, okay, now I see what you're going for. In the meantime, I'm going to be sitting here predicting that in a 14-game season, they go 3-11. Like, it's because I don't see what they see, and maybe that's how it should be. But yikes!
How do you think Nichols is going to handle a 3-11, a 2-12 type season at this point in his career? Because he's gracious and understanding, but he's not. I mean, he's not here for sitting around and being on a team that's getting crushed and developing something.
Is he good enough to expect better though? Like where
it's tough based on Winnipeg though. Like when he was surrounded by the right things in Winnipeg, that dude, if he was healthy, he could have won the Grey Cup instead of Claros and Strevler and that combination. Like Nichols absolutely could have won the Grey Cup. And we would look at him differently right now than we have. If he hadn't have signed with Toronto, if he would have gone straight to Ottawa, we would have probably looked at him differently as well. But the reality is what has happened has happened. He got injured. He didn't play in the Grey Cup. He ends up getting shipped out of there. He goes a free agency to Toronto. He ends up not being able to come to terms with Toronto. He goes to Ottawa. And now, and it's like, is the back end of Matt Nichols' career just going to be hanging out in Ottawa, losing football games and being close to Paul LaPolice? Because that doesn't really seem appealing to me if I'm him. He has bigger goals than that. But I mean, the East Division right now, Toronto is stocking up. They think they've got the quarterback of the future. Hamilton is stocking up. And you only need two teams in a division that all of a sudden the other two or three teams, depending if it's East or West, you can get pushed to the margins pretty quickly. And like you're saying, Ottawa is probably going to get pushed to the margins. I wonder how that relationship evolves as the season goes on and into possibly future years as well.
Yeah, I just my Matt Nichols is, I think there are probably 5 better quarterbacks than Matt Nichols. So can you really throw around his weight? And people would argue they'd rather have Vernon Adams than Matt Nichols. I'm probably not in that case, but if you told me BC, Edmonton, Calgary, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, right off the bat, all 5 teams in the West have a quarterback I would take before Matt Nichols, right? Yeah. And then you have in Hamilton, Jeremiah Masoli. Now we're getting closer, but I'd probably take Masoli. So I would love for Matt Nichols. I would love for Matt Nichols to have led the Bombers to that Grey Cup, because he was fantastic at not turning the ball over, not putting the ball in harm's way, and getting really good production off of it. But to me, from just what I've seen in his time, what I've been able to chart in his time, I think game manager is appropriate. And there's nothing wrong with that, because if you game manage your way to a Grey Cup title, if you could be, the Canadian Football League's version of Trent Dilfer, you could run your own Elite 11 camp. Phenomenal. No one is really going to care how you got the Grey Cup ring. You're the quarterback of a Grey Cup team. If it's because Willie's a phenomenon and, man, Andrew Harris just ran through them, I was the quarterback, though. I was the quarterback of a Grey Cup champion, and they're going to put my statue at IG Field. Like, that's nothing to be ashamed of. I have a real defined ceiling for Matt Nichols.
Yeah, which is totally fair. I think the biggest difference from Nichols to Claros that I had found in the tracking of games was that Claros he embraced big time throws on second down more than Nichols did.
Yep.
Like he was more willing to go down the field. He was more willing to put it into tighter spots. He made bigger plays. Production grade was better. All the things that I kind of use as metrics to see whether or not somebody was actually making plays that are required of them in those second down situations. Claros on first down he was boring. Like, he was put into that system and they were just saying, hey, just don't screw the thing up on first down. You got Andrew Harrison next to you and a pretty good offensive line. And on second down, if they got screwed on first, it was like, hey, Zach, can you bail us out? And so many times he did, in a way that ended up coming out numbers-wise a little bit superior to what Nichols did. So, yeah, I wonder again, though, in Ottawa, like if you're going with Timothy Flanders, let's say, at running back, and you end up putting the ball in his hands and you're not getting the production on first down, you're playing a lot of second and eights. If that's your reality, is Nichols going to be able to make those big time throws on second down the field, challenging? And if so, who's he throwing to outside of Jalen Saunders and RJ Harris?
That'll be a thing. I hope for that sake, Lapo then goes, okay, well, I don't have that offensive line that I had it in Winnipeg. I need to not be 55-45 on first down. I need to be closer to the league, right, which is 67 and 70% pass on first down, because no reason Nichols can't throw the ball on first down. No reason RJ Harris can't get a speed out open on first down for 7 yards and you're in 2nd and 3 that way, because just passing is just so much more efficient. That's the one position, honestly, with the Red Blacks that doesn't bother me as we go super deep on the Red Blacks is Timothy Flanders hasn't, I don't know last time I saw Timothy Flanders carry the football, but I don't think the particular running back matters that much. And if Mateus and Mark Cordy and Nolan McMillan are going to crush dudes, double team the nose and get them out of the way, and here's a hole, anybody can hit that. Galander's 1,000 for me, whatever they can do. But throw the ball on first down. Nichols is a decent thrower of the football. And I was going back through the numbers, like 5 interceptions in his passes, adjusted interception rate, including ones that were dropped by defenders. He only had 6 of those in total. Like, 6 adjusted interceptions. That's a super low rate. Don't be afraid of letting I don't know how far you have him throw the ball down the field, but in that short controlled offense that Lapo ran in Winnipeg, Matt Nichols did some very nice things.
Yeah.
Not world beating, not blow your hair back things, not Cody Fajardo diving for the cone against the Ticats in week 8 things, but Matt Nichols can win some football games for you.
Yeah, no doubt.
Sure.
The last thing I'll say before we wrap up here is that we're both making the prediction that Vernon Adams Jr. has already peaked and can't get better, and we just don't see it happening going into this season and all the rest. I did see one video clip that terrified me, though, that we might both be made to look very wrong, which was the clip of the Alouettes coming into the Pacific Northwest and Vernon Adams Jr. Getting an opportunity to bring his teammates in and doing these throwing sessions. And there was one throw in particular, and again, I'm sorry for being CSI off-season video guy, but when I saw this, the thing with Vernon that's always been messed up to me, and again, throwing in t-shirts and shorts in the offseason is not the same as throwing 2 horrific interceptions in the East semifinal directly to Edmonton defenders. But when I see his mechanics, a lot of the time his feet don't match his shoulders. And so he's kind of like detached, and it leads to these accuracy issues and the ball being placed all over the spot. And for me, I saw this one throw of him where he got out of a drop. It was super crisp, and the ball came out quicker than I had ever seen before with Vernon Adams Jr. And I was like, man, if he starts to nail down some accuracy stuff and he starts to learn and progress and evolve with decision making, like, he can still give you the deep ball, but he can also add in a little bit more of that well-rounded playing style that you get from the really good players in the CFL at quarterback. So I saw this one throw, and I don't even know what the throw was. I went back and watched it 3 or 4 different times, and I was like, yeah, that looks different. I'm excited to see when he gets to training camp. Hopefully that's something he's added to his game.
Yeah, you just can't keep putting the ball in harm's way, and you get away with it for a little bit. You can get away. People dropped interceptions are absolutely a real thing. If you throw it to a defender and he doesn't catch it, it's still an atrocious throw. 28 adjusted interceptions last year is a real rough number. 9 dropped by defenders, so that 1 out of every 16 passes either was picked or should be picked. You're in a category with the Strevolution, 2019 Jonathan Jennings, and just ahead of 2019 Dominic Davis.
Man,
that the regression is going to come in my mind. I don't want to put it too fine a point, but the regression is going to come in my mind for Vernon Adams unless dramatic changes were made, which so much fun. I hope it doesn't, but that's just what I see.
Yeah, and I'm with you on I'm with you on that, and I see that happening as well. But it's kind of like, okay, so if that does happen, if the regression happens and people get more interceptions, more turnovers, Montreal loses more games, what does Montreal do? Like, honestly, what are they at that point? Because I'm not saying they've put all their eggs in one basket financially, and he's the long term or anything, but I'm just saying you're kind of building this mentality. Like, this could honestly be, who was the running back in the year that Durant was in Montreal? Do you remember off the top of your, was it Stanback or was it somebody else?
Oh, that would have been too early for Stanback.
Was it? Okay, I was going to say, I can't remember exactly who it was.
Let me dig in and find it.
It might have been some combination of like Shaq Murray Lawrence or something like that was there. But when Durant went sideways in Montreal with Nick Lewis, and all they were able to do was throw like little 8-yard crossing routes in 16 or 17, whenever that was.
Yeah, Rutley and Sutton were the duo then.
Rutley and Sutton. Okay, I remember them deciding pretty obviously when things started to go south with Durant and the overall performance in Montreal. Yeah, we're just going to run it more than we should. More than we should, more than is suggested, more than is league average. Let's just do the running thing. And I wonder if that might be the pivot for Montreal if things do go sideways. If they just start saying, like, we got William Stanback here, let's just give the dude the ball 20, 25 times a game and see what happens.
Well, here's the thing where that's not loony. Like, apart from it's a 3-down football game and it makes it that much tougher. When it's really front 6 and back 6 in the CFL, and Sam linebackers are Patrick Level's size.
Yeah.
You go, if you really wanted to make it 1970 again, and if Montreal had Hamilton's 2 tight ends and you went Burton, Kalinic, and here's 7-man front, and we're gonna hammer you. Like, okay, you could accommodate, but if you found a way with a guy like Jake Burt who could probably run a pattern and crush people on blocks, if you had multiple guys with multiple weapon skill like that, both can block and can run passes, you could probably do some damage in the Canadian Football League with that. I just don't see that in Montreal, and their receivers are really nice. That's a nice collection of receivers as well. I think they're probably locked into that, but yeah, stand back. Give me a full season of stand back. I want to see this go. 1,000 yards in 14 games. I want to see this go. Man.
Chasing down Pringle with every yard there in Montreal. Just 1 yard at a time is what he's got. Thank you to everybody for tuning in right here on The Breakdown. As always, we are brought to you by our friends at Fox 40, worldwide leaders in whistle technology. Don't forget the promo code CFP15. Get 15% off all of your whistle needs at fox40shop.com. And thank you to Sawdust City Brewing for the delicious Mojito IPA that I've enjoyed throughout the show here. You can always get fresh beer from Sawdust City. They're up in Gravenhurst, Ontario, but they do deliver all over the province, and you get the promo code there as well. CFP, receive free shipping on all orders over $100, available to Ontario residents only. Must be of legal drinking age. Coming up for you tomorrow, it is going to be Wade and Connor doing a breakdown of the West Division in terms of the CFL Draft, looking around and seeing exactly which picks they like, which ones they didn't, giving some draft grades out as well. Friday will be Marsh and Mello. We will air the full-length Darren Flutie interview that I did earlier this week on Marsh and Mello coming up as he talks about all things Jake Burt. And we got a piece as well coming out that's going to be on Burt and Flutie's connection from Boston College. And I'm going to end up putting out a piece on Russ Jackson's 4 Grey Cups, I think either late this week or early next week. So lots of fun stuff for you on Canadian Football Perspective. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CF Perspective, of course. And DT has got the Sports Cage going on 620 CKRM throughout the remainder of the week, as always. What do you got going on for the next couple of days?
Oh, we're going to have to start talking about playoff hockey whenever the Vancouver Canucks are let to stop playing hockey. They're playing games at 1 PM on weekdays to get the season over. Just cancel it.
Yeah, it is wild, man. They're in such a weird spot. But it's actually snuck up on me because I'm not following all of the sports every day now. When I saw people saying, hey, 4 games to go, and I'm like, what? Really? Okay, yeah. Sure. My sports calendar in my mind is already messed up, and then not following it every day has been a bit of a weird one. But hey, congratulations to the Leafs, who needed a completely makeshift, made-up COVID year where you played against teams you never play against this many times to be able to win the division, and everybody's going to get flags for their cars in the Toronto area and act like they were actually champions. So.
And they're going to lose in 6 to Montreal. That's all we need. That's all we want. Awesome.
Thank you, DT. I do appreciate it, man. Have yourself a good day, okay?
Thanks, brother. That
is at DT on SC. I'm at TSN_Marsh. We are The Breakdown. Back next week for more fun for you right here on Canadian Football Perspective.